Today, we've been talking to survivors of sex trafficking. And if you think that is something that cannot happen to a child you love or someone in your life, I say pause and think again. And I want everybody to think about this. According to the International Labor Organization, an estimated $99 billion in profits are made from commercial sexual exploitation. That's around the world every year. $99 billion made off of, in many cases, children. And you might be surprised to learn that in the U.S., we are one of the countries on that list at the top. And this is going by every day. Our next guest spent years seeking out Jeffrey Epstein survivors to expose his horrific crimes. Her series of firsthand accounts by survivors published in the Miami Herald shocked the world and finally led to Jeffrey Epstein's arrest. Please welcome Julie K. Brown. I am just so it's strange to say happy to talk to you because of the circumstances in which your name became a household name, Julie. But the first question I have, I said I drove by Jeffrey Epstein's Manhattan mansion yesterday. It still baffles me how people refer to it as a secret that everyone knew but didn't say anything about, or people have stories of having seen him with underage girls and said nothing. It was your dogged reporting that exposed this.
Yeah, it was. I just think that it was a case that a lot of journalists knew about and had looked into, but it never got very far. There were a lot of powerful people involved. And, I think a lot of journalists hit a wall. There were certain people that just wouldn't talk. And so I decided, when the prosecutor who handled his investigation got nominated as labor secretary, I decided that maybe it was time to look at this like a cold case and take it apart to see if I could find out exactly how this injustice happened.
Well, that's a fascinating point. I should point out we're both Temple grads, and anytime you live in North Philly, you get thick skin and you can survive anything. With that said, you were living under the threat of lawsuits. You're looking in dark places where very powerful, rich people are hiding, and they know you were hunting them down. What was that like? And the pressure even sometimes where you don't get the support from our industry to expose these people?
Well, I had a good reporting partner in Emily Michaud, my videographer and photographer. We had worked on a number of projects before. And so we supported each other. Of course, I had the support of the Miami Herald, specifically the executive editor. I went to her early on to explain to her that this was probably going to be a tough project to do, and my editor, Casey Frank. I just think that we knew, especially as I started to track down these victims and realizing the high number of victims, that this was something that needed to be looked at again.
And Julie is executive producer of the highly acclaimed podcast Broken. Jeffrey Epstein, the first season focused on his sex trafficking ring. But this season, there's a new focus and a new intention. And joining us to talk with Julie as well is Tara Palmeri, the host and investigative journalist for the podcast this season, Broken, Seeking Justice. Tara, that I think is, again, the forward of the story. Julie did such a phenomenal job as a journalist, award-winning now, breaking down the pieces and getting there. But justice is still not there. These cases are pending. Right. Tell me about this season's podcast.
That's exactly right. I mean, Jeffrey Epstein is dead, and he's just such a small piece of this. That's what I kept hearing from the survivors, that there are so many people out there that enabled, that participated in these crimes, whether they were friends of Jeffrey Epstein, very powerful people who are living in the shadows to this day. Then you have the Justice Department that created this sweetheart deal for Jeffrey Epstein. And there were just so many pieces that created this world of Jeffrey Epstein. And it's really a reflection of our society, which is that one that just really values money over everything else. So you have so many people out there who are complicit in his crimes and have not paid a price and have been living in the shadows. And these survivors, I wanted to tell the story about what it's like to have to take justice into your own hands because you don't trust the Justice Department. They have been let down so many times. Right. And you see that in Julie's reporting. You hear that in the podcast. And I my heart broke. And I was like, I am so inspired by these women because they are, like Marika, they are digging into their crimes.
Julie, the intention of this show really was also to remind people that it can happen to any kid any young woman, any young man for that matter, that these are not as isolated as we'd like to believe. What did you learn beyond the Jeffrey Epstein case about trafficking and how this manipulation works?
I think one of the things to keep in mind is that, as you mentioned earlier, this could involve anybody. It could be your neighbor next door, your neighbor's child next door. This happens a lot more than people realize, and I think that people sometimes they see things that maybe don't look off to them, and in the case of Jeffrey Epstein, people had to see things that weren't right. But I think sometimes you tend not to want to raise these things. You don't want
Right.
to rock the boat. You want to think well of your neighbor. You don't want to raise. But I think
Right.
people have to realize that if you have a gut feeling that something's wrong, then maybe you should be asking questions about it.
Well, congratulations again on being brave for other people who have been silent for so long and need you, Tara, need you, Julie, to help their stories move to the forefront. Congratulations on the second season of their podcast. It's called Broken, Seeking Justice. It's now on your favorite podcast app.